On today's World Insight, California Governor Gavin Newsom is on a week-long trip to China. Can this governor's trip impact China-U.S. ties as a whole?
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and welcome to World Insight. California Governor Gavin Newsom is visiting China this week. He has already landed in Hong Kong and will visit Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong, and Jiangsu later this week. The trip focuses on climate action and partnership between the world's two largest economies. China is one of California's largest trading partners, and California is home to almost a third of Chinese Americans. It also attracts more Chinese investment, tourists, and also students than any other U.S. state. Could a successful trip by the California governor to China cascade into better ties between the two countries, particularly at sub-national level? For more on the discussion about this, let's invite these four gentlemen. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. In New York, Robert Hormat, lecturer of Yale School of Management. He's also former Undersecretary of State for Economic Business and Agricultural Affairs from the U.S. In Los Angeles, Alex Guang, faculty co-director at the Emmett Institute of Climate Change and Environment at the UCLA School of Law. In Shanghai, Joseph Gregory Mahoney, professor of politics with East China Normal University. In Beijing, Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, what a pleasure. It's such a grand panel. The visit by the California governor to China this week certainly is going to be of quite some significance. From where you are, Professor Wang, based in UCLA, what do you see are the most likely outcome of this trip?
Yeah, so the trip that Governor Newsom is taking is focused on climate change primarily, and so they're going to several cities, looking at the experience in Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, and other places. The tenor of these trips in past years has often been focused on what China can learn from California. I think that still remains the case, but we are at a stage in which there are experiences from China that are worth taking a look at. I think the trip to Shenzhen to look at how they move to 100% electric buses will be interesting to see how they finance those buses and operate the system to keep them all charged. And offshore wind is an area where China has occupies about 50% of the capacity globally. And so that's really an area to see how has China done so much so quickly.
How is it likely, Mr. Hormat, with your experience with the U.S. government, these kind of local interactions going to have an impact on the general atmosphere and also the topics of discussion between national governments?
Well, that's a really good question, because one of the things when I was in government, there was a lot of what we called subnational conversation. The states and the provinces, the American states and the Chinese provinces, many of them had very close relationships with one another and exchanged governors and provincial governors and ideas. And I think it helps the people of various states to understand better what's going on in China if the governors, or in some cases mayors, have a chance to visit China, and vice versa. The hope is that Chinese officials will come here and see what's going on here, because the relationship has been deteriorating, and we're not going to resolve it. No governor is going to resolve it all at once and on one trip. But I think you take issues that people are concerned about, and environment is certainly one of them. I think cooperation on health issues is another. And there are several issues that are human issues that are not, the major geopolitical issues. And if you can start making some progress and build some confidence on some of these smaller issues, but very important ones, you can perhaps improve the environment for dealing with some of these larger geostrategic issues, which, for instance, between our countries, and will be, unless we're able to work out a better set of solutions, or at least some.
Okay. Professor Mahoney, we noticed that the Californian governor has been with quite rich domestic experiences. Of course, his 2 overseas trips as governor are going to Israel earlier and to China, visiting at the provincial level. So how do you see the choices? This governor, certainly quite a prominent figure in the Democratic Party, is choosing, and what does that mean if you're looking at it from the political perspective?
Well, California limits governors to 2 terms, and he's currently in his 2nd term. He might consider running for the U.S. Senate because he's demonstrated the ability to win a statewide race in California, which is a very difficult thing to accomplish. Or, he might be angling down the road for a prominent cabinet position should Biden win again. And if Biden doesn't, then Newsom might be positioning for a presidential or vice presidential run 4 years later. But in fact, historically, only Republican politicians like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan have managed to win the presidency. And there are a number of political, economic, and cultural reasons that disfavor California Democrats in national elections. Nevertheless, his trip to Israel, but also coming to China, this gives Newsom the opportunity to burnish his foreign policy credentials, something that most governors struggle to acquire as they consider future political prospects. But, whatever his future plans, he's right to focus on climate change cooperation. No other state in the U.S. has as much in common with China geographically. No other state faces climate change risks on nearly the same order of magnitude or on the same ocean.
Professor Wang, you are based in California. Looking at the population makeup of the state, of course, the economy could be the 5th largest in the world if it is a country itself. Having said that, though, the largest proportion of Chinese American immigrants are in California. Meanwhile, China is California's largest trading partner if you're looking at country-wise partnership. So how do you see, as a good governor of California, what the governor should do? Is this trip part of that job application or job, shall I say, description?
Yeah, so I think what you highlight about the racial diversity here in California is an important part of the fabric of California. Part of the explicit purpose of the trip, climate change is the focus, but they mention economic development and tamping down on xenophobia and anti-Asian hate, which have been problems in California in recent years. And so I think those are all ways that they're reaching out to the constituencies here in California and saying, these are things that we know you care about, and we're reaching out to China to talk about those things as well.
Professor Liu, talking about trade and economic ties, China-California, very important. One couldn't underline the importance of it more. There are just so many business communities interactions between the 2 sides. Tell me more about your thoughts on what this could mean in terms of warming up trade and investment possibilities, which have been suffering as a result of geopolitics.
China and California had a number of close interactions, and for the one example is that there are many cities who sign up twin city agreements with a number of cities like LA and San Francisco, etc. So that's the basis for friendship. California, given its one is the largest economy among the United States in terms of on the state level, and also the hub for innovation. So these are really the window opportunities China is really actively seeking. And plus that when China is also getting its robust economy and with the big needs for particularly for climate-related technologies and equipment. So that's really the basis collaboration. Besides, China and the United States had the 10-year framework on collaboration on energy and environment, and unfortunately, it lapsed since the end of 2018. And now on a regional level or subnational level, to get it renewed after Kerry's visit to China. And this is something that needs really to give the light of optimism.
Mr. Mahoney, now we have been hearing from American business community, especially global companies, their complaints to the U.S. government about recently not doing enough in terms of interaction with China. Their argument is to compete with China, one needs to to know China well and also to interact with China, including in the business sector. Now, what is your take of the California governor's visit to China and the economic trade ties California traditionally has been having with China as a result of this trip?
Well, again, I think there are two intersecting issues here, and we shouldn't underestimate their intersection. So again, like China, California understands firsthand the existential threat that climate change and associated extreme weather poses. And this poses not just threats to their people, but also to their industries, their key industries. Certainly, China has taken the leading position in green tech and innovation. And I would disagree with Alex a little bit. I would say that China has surged much more ahead of other countries in terms of dealing and confronting with climate change in very effective ways. And I think California has a lot more to learn from China than it realizes. Nevertheless, as a recent leading think tank declared, climate change in California is an immediate and escalating threat. At the same time, the California economy is not dominated by the oil, coal, and automobile industries or lobbies. And unlike Washington, the state government is not overwhelmed by the military-industrial academic think tank complex. Rather, California is driven by technology, agriculture, and entertainment. And each of these sectors wants to continue to trade with China and to sustain those relations. Now, one can imagine that Newsom has had numerous conversations with key business leaders in his state, including the head of Apple and other major firms, who've also come to China to try to improve ties on many occasions.
Professor Wang, since your name is being mentioned, please.
Yeah, look, I think that China has done a lot on the deployment of clean energy and electric vehicles. I had an op-ed out last week talking about those are areas in which I think California can learn from China. But there are plenty of things that China still needs to learn from others as well. I think that's why it's a great partnership, because both sides are struggling with issues that we don't know the answer to right now. So how do we rapidly decarbonize an economy, fundamentally change our energy system? China's done a great job on deployment, but they also have problems on making sure those deployed and built wind and solar technologies get on the grid and get used. Right? And that's something that they could learn from California. There are very great challenges with how do you balance all of the different interests, environmental, economic, biodiversity, pollution, lots of different interests that require robust participatory processes and transparency. That's something that California and China have shared a lot of ideas about and are grappling with how to implement climate action quickly while considering all of these other interests as well.
Go to you, Mr. Hormats. You've been playing a key role in linking the businesses from both sides, but of course things have been evolving so quickly and differently these days. Tell me more about your thoughts on China, California business economic investment ties at this point.
Well, since I'm in New York, I leave it to people in California to be the real experts in this, but I would simply say that I do think that Alex's point is an interesting one, and that is there is an opportunity here because there's so much trade, because there's so much interaction, between California companies and Chinese companies to help to increase opportunities for mutual progress in certain areas, environment being one, but there are numerous others. But second, I think what our Commerce Secretary, when she was there, was able to do was to get a process started by which the companies in China, a number of companies in China, and a number of companies in the United States would have an ongoing dialogue. And I think that can help to resolve some of the misunderstandings that have emerged on numerous commercial issues and some of the problems. I think there is an opportunity for companies to try to figure out ways of resolving differences and developing sets of principles and norms that will help to provide a framework for more collaboration, because these are companies that not only are technologically important, but are important to creating growth and employment. And I think that to the extent that some of these smaller and newer companies can thrive, both in China and in the U.S.,
Well, we are talking about the visit of California governor to China. We are also seeing at the national level, things are taking place regarding trade and economic ties. The latest news suggests that the China-U.S. Economic Working Group has been having its first virtual meeting, headed by coming from both sides are mainly vice ministerial level officials talking to one another. And the scale of this discussion, and here I quote, includes global macroeconomic situation and policies, bilateral economic ties, cooperation for global challenges. And it has been, as it put in the news release, frank, constructive communication from both sides. And China has also expressed its concern to the other party. It seems that, Mr. Hormat, we are seeing a more ecosystem now starting to come back to life somewhat. How would you characterize the current situation?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. I think the communication is critically important, and to have a commerce secretary. She had not been to China before, and I had a dinner with her before she left. I explained that I'd been to China starting in 1972 with Dr. Kissinger and gave her a little bit of the history, but she saw this as an opportunity, and the Commerce Department now plays a much greater role than it did several years ago in U.S.-China economic relations. But I do think that there is, with this trip and other visits like Tim Cook and various others, Gates, a feeling that we can talk about these issues. We can't resolve them all, but we can talk about them in a constructive way. And I think that there is a feeling on the part of a number of American companies that they have a lot of vested interests in doing business with China. They've been doing business with China for 20 or 30 years, and they want to continue, but they want to try to make sure that progress is made on some of the issues of concern to them. And they know that the way of doing it is to collaborate and talk. The Chinese companies have concerns with some American policies, and the way to deal with those concerns is to have these kinds of conversations with the Commerce Secretary and other senior officials and business people who take the message back to Washington or to the States and say, here's a concern that I learned about, and try to figure out how to deal with it.
Professor Liu, how would you characterize the current situation? Are we seeing both sides testing the water, or feeling the temperature, or already trying to figure out how to make the water flow as it should be? Which stage are we?
I think now people come back with less emotion, but more rationality, and they recognize the interdependence can hardly be decoupled, despite of all the political voices. And previously, we had the Strategic Economic Dialogue, and also the GCCT, the Joint Commerce Committee, who were really actively working to streamline some of the distrust and also some of the bugs in collaboration. And later on, President Xi in Mar-a-Lago struck the 4-area platform for dialogue, but that really very soon the ellipses. But then, where are the official avenues to collaborate? So Raimondo's visit to China really, achieved by having the biannual dialogue on the minister level on commerce, and also the annual meeting on the minister level. So therefore, this is really something to revive or recalibrate the official platform for dialogue.
Right. If I might add, just I've been part of a number of U.S.-China climate discussions in the last few months, and both sides are quite frank that, look, we're having these conversations in the context, we recognize that there are real tensions and real conflicts, even in the environment and climate area, but that there's so much that we can do on this apart from those conflicts, that let's not pretend like those conflicts don't exist, but let's see what we can do that's positive in light of those tensions.
What are the conflicts that you are talking about?
Trade on solar, issues on solar, critical minerals, supply chain security, these types of things. Competition amongst the industries in clean tech industries and electric vehicles. These are all very, things that the tensions may only get hotter, but there's also a lot that can be done. I like the focus of Newsom's trip, that he's focusing on areas in which they sort of stay away from these hottest issues and look for the areas where we can work together.
Despite of the synergy at the local level between China and the United States, when the national level atmosphere soured, for example, over the past few years, the local level also suffers tremendously. So now the question really is, which is feeding which? Even though there are some interactions between the two, but what is exactly the root of China-U.S. synergy? Is it coming from the local level, or is it going to be ultimately decided at the national level by national governments? Looking at the U.S. election in the coming year, of course, it's going to be, once again, very dramatic. We only have a few months to go.
I think that at the state and local level, there's a higher level of practicality, because they have to deal with a lot of these issues. And for the farmers of South Dakota and the farmers of Iowa, China is very important. For the technology companies of California, China is very important. For the financial community in New York, China is very important. So I think you're seeing a lot of pressure and a lot of attention being given by the various mayors and governors, because the companies that operate within their states or their cities do care about the relationship with China. They see there's an economic benefit. Obviously, they understand that Washington calls the shots on some of the major issues, but I think there's a big role that the states and the cities can play.
Looking at coming November, APEC is going to be a grand occasion in which leaders from the APEC economies are likely to gather. It happens every year almost. So many believe Professor Mahoney is going to be another important occasion for China and the United States to interact. Now, at this point, we don't know yet at what level, but looking at all these grand events still on the calendar, including APEC and COP28. So how do you see the possibility of U.S. and China interaction, both at local and national level? What could that say, and what should be done?
Well, I think it's absolutely, we have to celebrate the fact that the governor of California is coming back to China. I think he could be establishing a friendship, and China loves having old friends. And I think that it's clear that his traveling to other parts of China signifies a commitment to extending this relationship. I'm not that interested in the possibility of a meeting between Xi and Biden later this year. Of course, if it happens, that would be wonderful. But I think Biden is very committed to a Cold War paradigm, and that's the direction that we'll be taking, whatever is said or whoever meets or wherever they meet. But nevertheless, I think if Gavin does have a good meeting here in China, that it may create some positive energy for Biden to meet with Xi in California. But it would also be strange if he doesn't. But I wouldn't expect that meeting to yield much if it does take place.
I'm curious to see, in particular, what we learn about what this means for other countries other than the U.S. and China. There's an interesting competition right now among the two global superpowers for the favor of other countries. And I think this is a forum where a lot of countries will be in the same room. And I hope that it leads to better outcomes for these other countries, the smaller players around the region.
I just want to share some very interesting piece of information with all of you, that it was yesterday, on Monday, the U.S. ambassador's residence house is being named after George Bush and Barbara Bush. Of course, as you know, they were in China, Mr. Hormat, back in the 1970s. At the time, there were no yet U.S. embassy in China, but they were the pioneers in trying to establish some kind of more normalized relations with China. And that story had been told many times in the past few decades. Now, Mr. Hormat, interestingly, the Chinese Executive Vice Minister Ma Zhaoxu was also there, together with the U.S. ambassador, to unveil the name of the U.S. ambassador's residence in China. So all of this could be one piece of news here and there. When they are being put together, it seems that there are some kinds of momentum that's going on right here. Of course, I don't want to anticipate more than I should, but Mr. Hormat, given your quite historical, your experience in history, how do you read all of these bits and pieces and putting them together?
The fact that these dialogues are becoming more frequent, are dealing with some of these very important issues, gives me a hopeful signal that the tone of the relationship is improving and the opportunities for cooperation are improving. And I think we're getting more positive energy on both sides to at least try to work these problems out in a constructive way. And I think if we work together, we understand it's good for both sides and good for the world.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot. Really appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insights. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of my team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.